Hey Nolan, you've been working nonstop. Take a day off, man. My boss, Martin, grinned as he slapped me on the back. I looked up from my screen, surprised by the suggestion. Are you sure? There's a lot to get done. I replied, though I could feel the fatigue in my bones. I've been pulling long hours, barely seeing Diana or Timmy. Positive. You've earned it, Martin insisted, nodding toward the door. Get out of here. Spend some time with your family. Thanks, Martin, I said, a smile creeping onto my face as I closed my laptop. As I gathered my things, I thought about how nice it would be to surprise Diana. Lately, she seemed distant, distracted by something she never talked about. I shrugged it off, thinking a day together might be what we needed. The drive home was peaceful. The usual rush hour traffic was still hours away. I turned on the radio, but my mind wandered. I hadn't taken a spontaneous day off in years, and the idea of spending it with Diana and Timmy lifted my spirits. We could take Timmy to the park, maybe grab some ice cream afterward. I could even make dinner tonight. It felt good to think about something other than work for a change. But as I got closer to home, a strange feeling settled in my chest. Something felt off, though I couldn't put my finger on it. I shook my head, dismissing the unease as leftover stress from work. Don't overthink it, I told myself, focusing instead on how surprised Diana would be. When I turned onto our street, I noticed Diana's car parked in the driveway. I frowned, puzzled. She usually took Timmy out for a walk around this time. Maybe she's just resting, I thought. She had mentioned feeling tired the last few days. I parked next to her car, grabbed my things, and headed to the front door. As I reached for the handle, I paused, listening. The house was eerily quiet. No sounds of Timmy playing, no TV in the background, nothing. My hand froze on the door handle for a moment. That strange feeling from earlier returning. Come on, Nolan. You're just being paranoid, I muttered, pushing the door open. Inside, the house was dim, the curtains partially drawn. I dropped my keys on the table by the door, the clink of metal echoing in the silence. Diana, I called out, my voice sounding too loud in the stillness. Hey, Daddy. Timmy's voice echoed through the hallway as he came charging toward me, tears streaming down his small face. He crashed into my leg, clinging to me like he was afraid to let go. My heart skipped a beat at the sight of his terror. What's wrong, buddy? I crouched down to his level, wiping away his tears with my thumb. He was trembling, his tiny body shaking in my arms. I could feel his fear, and it made my stomach twist. Daddy, there's a strange man in Mom's room, he whispered, his voice barely audible. His words sent a chill down my spine, a cold wave of dread washing over me. What do you mean, Timmy? What man? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. But inside, I was anything but calm. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what he was saying. He's in there with Mom, he stammered, burying his face in my chest. My heart pounded as I held him close, trying to figure out what was going on. Before I could process it, I heard footsteps rushing down the stairs. Nolan! Diana's voice was breathless as she appeared at the top of the staircase, her face pale, her eyes wide with panic. She looked like she had seen a ghost. What are you doing home? She asked, her voice shaky. Her gaze darted between me and Timmy, who was still clinging to me, his grip tightening as he sensed the tension. I stared at her, then back at Timmy. Why is he saying there's a man in your room, Diana? I asked, my voice low and controlled, though my insides were churning. Timmy, why do you lie to Daddy, huh? Diana's voice wavered as she tried to sound calm, but the fear in her eyes betrayed her. She took a step toward Timmy, reaching out for him, but I pulled him closer to me, shielding him from her. Stay here, buddy, I said gently, handing him his toy truck from the floor in his playroom. He took it, his little hands still trembling, but his eyes stayed locked on mine, filled with confusion and fear. I locked him there for the safety and went back. Nolan, please, let me explain, Diana pleaded, her voice cracking. She moved to block the stairs, desperation etched on her face. Move, I said quietly but firmly. She shook her head, her eyes filling with tears. Nolan, just listen to me, move! The word exploded out of me, and she flinched as if I had slapped her. She stood frozen for a moment, then shook her head again, refusing to budge. Her eyes begged me to stop, to listen, but I was done listening. "Nolan, please," she whispered, her voice breaking. But I was already past her, brushing her aside as I stormed up the stairs, my mind a whirlwind of anger and fear. "Nolan, wait!" Diana called after me, but I ignored her. My focus was on the bedroom door at the end of the hall. Each step felt like it took an eternity, my heart thundering in my chest. My mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, each one more terrifying than the last. I reached the door and paused, my hand hovering over the doorknob. The house was silent, too silent. I could hear my own breathing, harsh and quick, as I stood there, trying to brace myself for what I might find on the other side. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. What I saw made my blood run cold. A man stood in the middle of the room, frantically trying to pull on his pants. He stumbled, nearly falling over in his haste, his face flushed with embarrassment. Or maybe it was adrenaline. It was a face I recognized all too well, Mr. Thompson, Diana's boss. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. My mind struggled to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. Mr. Thompson, in my bedroom with my wife. The bed was a mess of tangled sheets, the air thick with the smell of sweat, and something else that made my stomach churn. "Hey man," Thompson said, finally managing to yank up his pants. His tone was casual, like he was greeting an old friend at a bar, not standing half-naked in another man's bedroom. "Your wife is awesome," he sneered, clearly unbothered by my presence. The arrogance in his voice was like gasoline on a fire, fueling the rage that was bubbling up inside me. "We just finished the 7th round," he continued with a smirk, as if he was proud of it. "Here's 10K. I'll come back again tomorrow." He tossed a thick wad of cash onto the bed without a second thought, like he was leaving a tip after a good meal. My blood boiled, the rage so intense that I could barely think. My hands curled in a fist at my sides, the urge to smash his smug face in overwhelming. But I stayed still, every muscle in my body tense like a coiled spring, ready to explode. Behind me, I heard a sob. Diana was standing in the doorway, tears streaming down her face, her body trembling. "Nolan, please," she choked out, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's not what it looks like." But her words were meaningless, drowned out by the roaring in my ears. The sight of her, standing there, looking so broken, only fueled my anger further. I ignored her, my eyes locked on Thompson, who was still standing there, completely unfazed. "You motherfucker," I said, my voice cold and controlled, though inside I was anything but. The words came out like a growl, low and dangerous. Thompson just laughed, a mocking, dismissive sound that made my skin crawl. "Come on, man, don't be so uptight. We were just having fun," he said, waving his hand like he was brushing off a minor inconvenience. That was the last straw. Something inside me snapped. The anger that had been boiling just below the surface finally erupted. I lunged at him without thinking, my body moving on pure instinct. As I charged forward, I slammed the door shut behind me, locking it in one swift motion. Thompson's expression shifted from arrogant amusement to something more cautious, but it was too late. I was on him before he could react, my fist crashing into his face with a force I didn't know I had. He staggered backward, tripping over the bed, but I didn't give him a chance to regain his balance. I grabbed him by the collar, yanking him back up, and punched him again, harder this time. Blood spattered from his nose, staining the crisp, white shirt he had been trying to button up moments before. "Nolan, stop!" Diana screamed from behind me, but her voice was distant, barely registering in my mind. All I could see was Thompson, his smug face now contorted in pain and fear. He tried to raise his hands in defense, but I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. "Please, man." Thompson's voice cracked as he tried to speak, his words slurred from the blows he'd taken. But I cut him off with another punch, sending him crashing to the floor. He landed hard, gasping for breath, his hands fumbling to protect his head as I loomed over him. I could feel my heart pounding, each beat like a drum in my ears. The room seemed to close in around me, everything narrowing to just the two of us, me and the man who had torn my life apart. I grabbed my belt from the floor, yanking it free of the loops in one smooth motion. The leather felt cool and solid in my hands, a stark contrast to the hot rage that was burning through me. Thompson's eyes widened as he realized what was coming. "No, please," he begged. Smirk vanished in an instant as he realized the gravity of the situation. His bravado melted away, leaving behind a man who finally understood the depth of the trouble he was in. "Wait, hold on," he stammered, trying to back away, but I was done listening to excuses. I was done with him. Before he could say another word, I swung the belt with all my strength. The first blow landed across his back with a sickening crack, and Thompson screamed, the sound raw and guttural. The sound of his pain only fueled the fire inside me. I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. Each lash of the belt was driven by the betrayal I felt, by the humiliation that had been festering inside me from the moment I walked into that room. Thompson's cries filled the air, each one louder than the last, but I was deaf to them. I was consumed by the need to make him pay. "Please, man, stop," Thompson begged, his voice breaking as he tried to shield himself from the blows. He scrambled to get away, but there was nowhere for him to go. I kept swinging, the belt cutting through the air and landing on his body with relentless precision. The sharp crack of leather against flesh echoed in the room, drowning out everything else. I could hear Diana on the other side of the door, her voice frantic. "Nolan, stop. Please stop," she shouted, her fists pounding against the wood. But her pleas were meaningless to me now. She was as much a part of this as he was, and nothing she said could reach me. I pulled out my phone with one hand, still swinging the belt with the other. I hit record, capturing every moment of Thompson's agony. "Beg," I hissed through gritted teeth, my voice cold and devoid of any mercy. "Beg for your life." Thompson was crying now, his face twisted in pain and fear. "Please, man, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," he sobbed, his body curling into a pathetic ball on the floor. His once pristine shirt was now soaked with sweat and blood, the fabric clinging to his trembling frame. But his apologies meant nothing to me. They were empty words, the desperate pleas of a man who thought he could escape the consequences of his actions. I was beyond reasoning, beyond any sense of pity or compassion. All that mattered was that he suffered as I had suffered, that he felt the full weight of the pain he had caused. "Not so tough now, are you?" I spat, kicking him hard in the ribs. He groaned, his body jerking with the impact. I could see the fear in his eyes, the realization that he was at my mercy. It was the same fear I had felt when I walked into that room and saw him with my wife. The belt struck again, and he let out another scream, his voice hoarse from the pain. I didn't relent. Each lash was a reminder of what he had taken from me, of the life he had shattered with his arrogance and greed. The recording on my phone captured it all. The screams, the pleas, the raw brutality of it. It was my evidence, my proof that he had paid for what he had done. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Thompson collapsed completely, his body limp and unresponsive. He lay there, curled up in a fetal position, sobbing uncontrollably. I stood over him, breathing heavily, the belt hanging loosely in my hand. My chest heaved with the effort, my heart pounding in my ears. I tossed the phone onto the bed, the recording still running, and turned toward the door where Diana was still pounding, her voice frantic and desperate. "Nolan, please let me in. Stop this, please," she cried. I walked to the door and unlocked it. I opened the door slowly, and Diana nearly fell into the room, her face drained of all color. She looked like she had seen a ghost, but it wasn't a ghost lying on the floor. It was Thompson, barely conscious, whimpering in a pool of his own blood and sweat. "Oh my God, Nolan, what have you done?" she whispered, her voice trembling as she took in the sight of her lover, broken and beaten on the floor. She moved toward him, her hands shaking as she knelt down beside him. "Take him," I said, my voice as cold as the rage still simmering inside me. I stepped aside, giving her room to reach him. She rushed to his side, trying to lift him, but he was too weak, his body too battered to move. "Please, Thompson, try to stand," she pleaded, her voice frantic as she struggled to support his weight. But he just groaned, his legs giving out beneath him, sending them both crashing back to the floor. "I didn't mean for this to happen, Nolan," Diana cried, turning to look up at me, her eyes filled with desperation. "It was a mistake. I swear, it was a mistake. A mistake." I echoed, feeling a twisted sense of satisfaction as I watched her crumble. The woman who had once stood so confidently before me was now reduced to a sobbing mess, clutching at the man who had helped destroy our life together. You think this was just a mistake? You think you can just apologize and everything will be fine? Her sobs grew louder, her shoulders shaking as she tried to find the words. I'm so sorry, she wept. Please, just let me explain. It didn't mean anything. I was confused, but I was done listening. Her words were like knives, each one cutting deeper into the wounds that were already too raw, too fresh. There was nothing she could say that would make any of this right. Nothing that would erase the image of her and Thompson from my mind. I walked over to the bed, grabbed my phone, and turned toward the door. Her pleas followed me, but they were hollow, meaningless sounds. I had given her everything, my love, my trust, my life, and she had thrown it all away for a man who was now lying broken at her feet. I'm sorry, Nolan. Please don't leave like this, she cried, her voice breaking as she tried to reach for me. But I stepped out of her grasp, my mind already made up. There was no going back from this. No fixing what had been shattered. I'm done, Diana, I said without looking back, the finality of the words settling over me like a heavy weight. I'm done with you with this. I walked out of the room, the sound of their crying fading as I made my way down the stairs. Each step felt like a release, the anger slowly ebbing away, leaving behind a cold emptiness. I had done what I needed to do. I had exacted my revenge, and now it was time to leave it all behind. In the playroom, I found Timmy sitting quietly on the floor, his little hands moving his toy cars around in a slow, deliberate way. His face was still tear-streaked, but his eyes were dry now, wide and uncertain as he looked up at me. Daddy, he said softly, his voice small and scared. I could see the confusion in his eyes, the fear that something was terribly wrong, but not knowing what. I crouched down beside him, gathering him into my arms. He was so small, so innocent in all of this. I held him close, feeling his tiny heartbeat against my chest, the warmth of his body grounding me in the midst of the chaos. It's just you and me now, buddy, I whispered, kissing the top of his head. My voice was steady, even though my world had just been torn apart. We're going to be okay. I promise. He nodded, his little arms wrapping around my neck as he held on tight. That night, the house felt emptier than ever, the silence almost suffocating. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, packing a small bag for Timmy and me. The weight of everything that had happened hung heavy on my shoulders, and I knew I couldn't stay in that house any longer. It wasn't just the walls that held the memories. I could still feel the betrayal in the air, lingering like a foul stench. I threw a few clothes into the bag, moving with a mechanical detachment. Timmy's favorite toys, a couple of his books, things that I knew would comfort him when the world we knew crumbled. I glanced at the clock. It was late, and the neighborhood was quiet. A part of me knew the police might come, might ask questions about the bruised and battered man left upstairs, but I didn't care. All I could think about was getting away, putting as much distance as possible between us and the pain that now filled every corner of this house. As I zipped up the bag, I heard soft footsteps behind me. I turned to see Diana standing in the doorway, her face pale, her eyes swollen from hours of crying. She looked like a woman on the edge of breaking, holding herself together by the thinnest of threads. Please don't go, Nolan, she said, her voice trembling as she stepped into the room. There was a desperate edge to her words, a plea that hung in the air between us. She reached out, her hand trembling as she tried to touch mine, but I pulled away, the gesture too painful, too loaded with everything that had happened. It's over, Diana, I said, my voice firm, leaving no room for doubt. The words felt heavy, final, like a door slamming shut. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. Her face crumpled, tears spilling down her cheeks as she tried to reach me one last time. Please, for Timmy's sake, she begged, her voice cracking with emotion. Don't do this. We can work this out, I swear. I'll do anything. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment, I saw the woman I had once loved. The mother of my child, the person I had shared my life with. But that image was shattered, replaced by the memory of what she had done. The trust was gone, broken beyond repair, and there was no going back. Timmy's going to be fine, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But I can't stay here, not after everything. You know that. She shook her head, her tears falling faster now. Nolan, please don't go. I know I messed up, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling, we can talk, anything, just don't leave. The desperation in her voice cut through me, but it wasn't enough to change my mind. The hurt, the anger, it was all still too fresh, too raw. I couldn't forgive her, not after what I'd seen, what I'd done in that room. The image of her with Thompson was burned into my mind, a constant reminder of the betrayal. It's too late, I said quietly, turning away from her. I picked up the bag, slinging it over my shoulder, and started toward the door. She followed me, her footsteps frantic as she tried to keep up. Nolan, please, she cried out, grabbing at my arm as I reached for the doorknob. I stopped, feeling her grip tighten as if she could somehow hold on to what was already lost. I turned to her one last time, looking into her tear-filled eyes. You will regret, I said, the words sounding hollow even to me. I gently pried her fingers from my arm, feeling them slip away, and then I was out the door. The cool night air hit me as I stepped outside, a sharp contrast to the suffocating tension inside. I walked to the car, opened the door, and gently placed the bag in the back seat. Timmy was already asleep, his small body curled up under a blanket. I watched him for a moment, his innocent face peaceful, unaware of the storm that had just torn his world apart. I slid into the driver's seat, the keys trembling slightly in my hand as I started the engine. Diana was still standing in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the dim light from inside. She looked so small, so defeated, but I couldn't let that change my mind. I had made my decision. Without another glance, I drove away, the tires crunching on the gravel as we left the driveway. The house, once our home, disappeared into the darkness behind us. I kept my eyes on the road, forcing myself to look ahead, to focus on the future that lay beyond the pain. As the miles stretched out in front of us, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. I had escaped, but at what cost? The life I had known was gone, but at least Timmy and I had each other. And as long as we had that, I knew we would find a way to be okay. Months passed, and each day brought a small step toward a new life for Timmy and me. We moved to a small town far from the painful memories that once haunted us. The town was quiet, with friendly faces and a slower pace that suited us just fine. I found a new job, something simple but steady, and gradually a routine began to form. Each day, the wounds of the past healed a little more, leaving scars that, while visible, no longer hurt as much. One afternoon, while taking Timmy to the park, I noticed a woman sitting on a bench, watching her dog play. She had a gentle smile that caught my eye, the kind that felt warm and genuine. Timmy, being the curious and friendly kid he was, ran over to the dog, laughing as it wagged its tail and licked his face. That's Emily, one of the other parents at the park mentioned, nodding toward the woman. She's good with kids, works at the local school. Emily looked up as Timmy's laughter filled the air, and our eyes met. She smiled, and I felt something inside me that I hadn't felt in a long time, a flicker of hope. We started talking, first about Timmy and her dog, then about the town, our lives, and the simple things that made up our days. It was easy, comfortable in a way that felt new and reassuring. As the weeks went by, we began to spend more time together. Emily had a way with Timmy that made him light up in a way I hadn't seen in months. She made him laugh, truly laugh, not the forced kind I'd heard since we left our old life behind. Watching them together, I felt something warm growing inside me, something I thought I'd lost forever. One evening, after dinner at her place, we sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Timmy was asleep inside, exhausted from a day of playing. Emily turned to me, her eyes soft and understanding. You've been through a lot, she said quietly, reaching out to take my hand. But you're strong, Nolan. You built a good life for you and Timmy. I squeezed her hand, feeling the truth in her words. I couldn't have done it alone, I admitted. You've been a big part of that. She smiled, and in that moment, I knew that this was the beginning of something real, something that could last. Diana had tried to contact me a few times. Letters, messages, even a phone call I didn't answer. She begged for forgiveness, for another chance. But each time, I thought of Timmy, of the life we were building here, and I knew I couldn't go back. The past was a closed door, one I had firmly locked behind me. Eventually, Emily and I got married in a small ceremony, just a few close friends and Timmy, who was thrilled to have Emily in our lives. We built a new life together, one filled with love, trust, and the quiet joy of moving forward. Timmy thrived, growing happier and more confident each day. And so did I. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace, knowing that the past was behind us and the future was ours to create. Years had passed since I left the old life behind, building something new with Emily and Timmy. Our days were filled with simple joys, and the past had faded into a distant memory. But one afternoon, as I sat at the kitchen table sorting through the mail, I came across a letter that made my heart stop. It was from Diana. I hesitated, the envelope feeling heavy in my hands. I hadn't heard from her in years, and I had moved on, or at least I thought I had. But something in me compelled me to open it, even though I knew it could bring nothing but pain. The letter was short, written in shaky handwriting that I barely recognized. Diana was sick, dying, and she wanted to see me one last time. She wrote about how much she regretted what she had done, how every day since had been filled with guilt and sorrow. She asked for my forgiveness, for a chance to make things right before it was too late. I read the letter over and over, each word cutting into me like a knife. I was torn between the memories of our past and the life I had now. Part of me wanted to tear the letter up, to pretend it never arrived. But another part of me knew that I couldn't ignore it. I had to face her one last time, if only to close that chapter of my life for good. I didn't tell Emily about the letter right away. I needed time to process it, to figure out what I was feeling. For days, I went through the motions, but my mind kept drifting back to Diana, to the woman she had been before everything fell apart, and to the person I had become since. Finally, I sat down with Emily one evening after Timmy had gone to bed. She could sense something was wrong, and when I handed her the letter, she read it in silence, her brow furrowed with concern. "What are you going to do?" she asked softly, her hand reaching across the table to cover mine. "I don't know," I admitted, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on me. Part of me wants to ignore it, to leave it in the past. But another part of me feels like I need to go, to face her one last time. Emily nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. "If you think it will help you find closure, then you should go. But whatever you decide, know that I'm here for you." Her support gave me the strength I needed to make the decision. A few days later, I found myself driving back to the town I had left behind, the memories flooding back as I neared the place that once felt like home. I parked outside the hospital, my hands gripping the steering wheel as I tried to steady my nerves. Inside, the smell of antiseptic filled the air as I walked down the sterile hallways. I found Diana's room easily enough. The nurse had pointed me in the right direction with a sympathetic look. I stood outside the door for a moment, gathering the courage to step inside. When I finally did, the sight of her took my breath away. Diana was a shadow of the woman I once knew. She lay in a hospital bed because of a blood cancer she didn't like to see Timmy. Her face pale and gaunt, her hair thinning and gray. Her eyes, once full of life, were now sunken and tired, but when she saw me, they lit up with a flicker of recognition. "Nolan," she whispered, her voice weak and raspy. Tears welled up in her eyes as she reached out a trembling hand. I took a seat beside her bed, my emotions a mix of anger, sorrow, and pity. "Diana," I said quietly, struggling to find the right words. "I got your letter." "I'm so sorry, Nolan," she said, her voice breaking. "I never meant to hurt you. I've thought about what I did every day since, and it's eaten away at me. I was so wrong, and I can't make it right, but I just needed you to know how sorry I am." I looked at her, the woman I had once loved so deeply, now reduced to this frail, broken figure. "I know," I replied, my heart heavy with the weight of everything left unsaid. But you did hurt me, Diana. You tore our family apart. Tears streamed down her face as she nodded, her body shaking with sobs. I know, and I've regretted it every day. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed to tell you how sorry I am. We talked for hours, revisiting the past, the mistakes, the pain. It was difficult, but in that sterile hospital room, something shifted inside me. The anger and bitterness that I had carried for so long began to lift, replaced by a sense of understanding. She was human, flawed, just like me. By the time I left her bedside, I had found a small piece of forgiveness in my heart. Not for her, but for myself. I knew that holding on to the past would only continue to poison my future. I walked out of the hospital feeling lighter, like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. When I returned home, Emily and Timmy were waiting for me. As I stepped through the door, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. I had faced my past, and now, finally, I could fully embrace the life I had built with them. The chapter with Diana was closed, and for the first time in a long time, I knew I was truly free.